Hello, this is Fire, and this is part 6 of my ongoing Vortex Field guide. Now on to the aspect of dread, the fourth of the 5 aspects. So, the aspect of dread's main themes are Frost, Curse, Invincible, built-in scaling, and generally just lots of debuffs that give you a bad time. So one thing that I realized that I actually wanted to have here is that I didn't in the previous ones is the starting health of the enemies. If I was professional, I'd go back and re-record the other parts, but I'm not a professional. The other thing with Dread, as you can see from here, is that we have 3 of them that all show up at once. So they each start with 500 health, and also they start with Invincible and Death Force 10. What this means is that you cannot deal damage to them on the first turn. That said, you can still dispel them. You can still apply debuffs. You can still freeze them. And if you have cards that do one of the interesting things about Invincible is if you have cards like Blessed Strike that say do something if this dealt 10 or more damage, it will still count damage that doesn't actually happen thanks to Invincible. So Lifesteal will still work when enemies are invincible. Like I said, Blessed Strike will work, Rookie Strike will work, etc. But you won't be able to do actual damage. You will only be able to get some minor benefits from that. Next up, I want to quickly talk about the Opportunist for all 3 of them. So as I've mentioned, the reason I bring up Opportunist is because even though this enemy cannot actually directly gain Opportunist through its actions, Manic Presence Weather does include a card which will split Opportunist across all enemies. So if that card happens to come up, this could be relevant. So the front one deals 4x2 damage and gives AoE Curse, AoE meaning that it gives that curse to you and any allies you have summoned. The middle one will do 3x3 AoE damage and apply 8 AoE Frost. And the back one will deal 3x4 damage and it will gain Invincible. So of these, probably the most important one to be aware of is the back one. It won't necessarily come up because Opportunist will start with the front enemy that has Opportunist. So you would either need to have tripped all of the Opportunists on the first 2 enemies, or the back one would have to be the only one left alive in order for this to happen. But if it does happen, it's very, very worth knowing that it will set up Invincible, and if it has multiple stacks of Opportunists, which will only happen if it was the only enemy around when the weather card was played, if it was one of 2 enemies around when the weather card was played, or if Hunt is involved. If it has multiple range of Opportunists, it's possible to set up multiple turns of Invincible if you trip Opportunists multiple times. This is also relevant if you're planning to use any cards, of course, that trip Opportunists on enemies. Do not do that to the back one here. It's worth noting it only gives itself Invincible. It does not give it Invincible to the rest of the squad like it does with its normal action, but don't mess yourself up with that. So, instead of going through actions one by one for these guys, I've decided to entirely talk about them with the whole set at once. And the reason why is that they effectively will have themed actually all their actions work together. It's easier to talk about them together for that reason. So the first turn, and they have a 4-turn cycle, they will, turn 1, each of them will apply 12 Frost. It is worth noting, if you are frozen, of course, that Frost applied will be halved. But despite that, if you have 10 max Frost, which is the baseline amount, and you are not able to get weak or tough, or if idols are active to increase the amount that they're doing, you will take 12, which will freeze you, and you will take 6 and 6, which will put you at a total of 24 Frost, which means you will be losing basically your entire next turn, because you have to play 2 cards to leave frozen, of course, and then you will need to play 2 more cards because you will immediately have refrozen because your max will have only gone up to 12, and you will have gone from 24 out of 10 to 14 out of 12, which is not a good time. For this reason, and remember, you cannot kill them on turn 1. They are invincible. There is no way around Invincible to stop them from taking a turn. You could theoretically stack 500 poison on each of them or whatever so that at the end of their turn, they would immediately die. But that is impractical for the majority of the time. It is unlikely, short of like really crazy catalyst shenanigans or frenzy shenanigans, that you would be able to stop them from, you would be able to set up that much debuff. So in practice, most of the time, you're going to have to deal with this turn 1, and it can be brutal. You really, really, really do not want to be double frozen going into turn 2 because things are not going to get better for you from there. So, tough, weak, good things. Anything that increases your max frost, Amulet of Frost, very, very valuable if you know you're fighting Dread. The market item that just gives you +2 of every status, great if you're fighting. Great in general, good in particular against Dread. Frost Cloak, even the other cloaks, any item that's giving you extra max frost, good. If you're fighting idols, of course, you can hope to get lucky and pick up extra max frost from an idol reward. And of course, if you have a barrier, that will give you +2. Or alternatively, you could use barrier, or not barrier, you could use purity. And if you have purity, that will also work. It is worth noting, of course, that although I said you were taking 24 frost, that was assuming that you were getting frozen from the first one. If you can't block the frost from the front one, you could very easily end up taking, or if you don't get frozen by the front one, you will still take the full 12 from the back one. And also, this goes up by +6 per cycle, which means that the second time around, it's going to be that much worse. Especially, again, with idols active. Because if you think 12 frost is bad, it is much worse if it is, 40% more than that. Which I'm too lazy to do the math on in my head. It's like 16 at least, 16 or 17. Not great. So that's turn 1. Turn 2, here's what you're dealing with. First of all, they are all doing debuffs. 1 debuff from the first one, 2 debuffs from the second one, 3 debuffs from the third one. First one, 4 curse. 2 additional curse per cycle. Second one, 1 nullify, which is going to block your next buff, and 2 decay. +1 per cycle. The 1 nullify tends to not be a huge issue the first time around, but you can get really trolled sometimes. The big one, the way you can get trolled here, is if you get tagged by this nullify, and then you have to deal with, and then Manic Presence, tries to do the frenzy and shrivels. There's no window between you getting that nullify and that frenzy showing up. So you just lose that frenzy. You don't get that incredible bonus, and instead you have additional shrivels on top of your deck, which is going to be a problem because the third guy is giving you brain freeze, frostbite, and fatigue, which is going to make your day even worse because now you don't have your frenzy and you have shrivels. Just not a good time. So in terms of freezing priority here on turn 2, so if you didn't freeze them on turn 1, you're saving your freeze for turn 2. It depends on how badly the fatigue hurts you. This is usually the least problematic one. That 4 curse isn't great, but if you can't deal with 4 curse, my dude, you are not going to like this fight. And the decay and the nullify tend to be more likely to be problematic if you are playing a character like Rowden or Paladin, who have an easy way to just get buffs. And for both of them, if they trip status, Rowden gets growth, Paladin gets sturdy. Any status you trip will get rid of the nullify. First time through, the nullify isn't usually that bad unless you specifically get got by Manic Presence. But on future rotations, it gets a lot worse. Then, this fatigue, like I said, can be a problem. It means that, so turn 2, I mentioned it's possible if you were not able to deal with turn 1 effectively, you lost 4 out of 5 of the cards in your hand going into turn 2, and you're going into turn 3 with nullified, decay, and fatigue. And they're all attacking, and they're all applying curse. So they're attacking for 4x4 base, +2 damage for each cycle, as well as 2 curse base, +2 for each cycle. So this is 6 curse, normally. If you have idols active, this is 9 curse, on top of the 4 you got last turn, and on top of all this damage you're taking. Cruelty Dread, Idol of Cruelty plus Dread is a really, really nasty combo. Because it means you take that much more damage from their attacks. You take that much. You have to deal 20% more frost, 20% more damage just from Cruelty being active in the run, and then specifically from this fight, you have to deal with 20% more curse damage, and you have to deal with the possibility that at any point, Idol of Cruelty could decide to add more curse and then trigger it, making your day immeasurably worse, potentially killing you on the spot. So, the only nice thing about this turn is that it is not directly ruining your ability to act on your fourth turn. So assuming the idols don't mess with you, if you have idols invoked, assuming the Manic Presence weather doesn't mess with you, you will be able turn 4 to act safely. There will be no invincible, there will be no decay, there will be no fatigue, there will not be a mountain of frost on you. You will be able to do stuff. Part of that will be unburying yourself from the stuff that was done to you on previous turns, but still, you'll be able to act. Brings us to the final turn of the cycle, which is relatively low impact in terms of what it does, but it sets up for a turn 5 where they will once again have invincible. So the front guy is going to trigger Frostbite 4 times on you and give you 5 crystallize, plus 1 per cycle. Now, the amount of Frostbite you have, probably not a ton, because you got Frostbite on turn 2. So on your turn 3, it ticked down, and then on your turn 4, it ticked down. So you probably have exactly 4 Frostbite left if you haven't cleansed at all. And let's be honest, you want to bring cleanse into this fight. So the Frostbite trigger, usually not a huge concern, but it is a thing that's happening. The crystallize, though, can absolutely be a problem, especially with bonus from idols. And the second one is going to give you curse twice, and that is just to mess with your purity. If you have, you will need 3 purity to block all of this. And it also means that it is effectively getting plus 2 curse per cycle because each of these is going up by 1. So to recap, if you have not blocked anything, if you haven't blocked anything, you haven't cleansed, at the end of Aspect's turn 4, you will have 15 curse, which is 30 damage a turn. That is obviously something you're going to need to deal with. And then finally, the back one is going to give them all invincible. It's going to give them all more death spores. It's going to give them all some frost barrier, which is not great for you. If you are an aggressive deck, you really, really don't want them to be able to take this 4th turn, because if they do, you're going to go back to the front of the cycle, and it's going to be that much worse. Aspect of Dread is a fight where you really want to keep building momentum early, and you want to be able to start taking them down. Ideally, you want one of these guys dead before you finish the first cycle. If you can only pick one of them, I would probably try and kill the back one. But even if you can just kill the front one, getting any of them dead will make your life much, much easier. Also, in addition to those buffs that sets up, it puts 2 copies of Grasp of Shadows into your deck, which is one of the most obnoxious blights. So it is a 2-cost blight. In order to if you actually play it, it gives you Curse 2 and Enfeebled 1, because you didn't have enough Curse. And you do also get to draw 1 in addition to getting the Curse 2 and Enfeebled 1. So it does at least replace itself. But you can't discard it. If you do, you'll lose health and shield. If you're holding it, you'll lose health and shield. Numbers here are 9. That's because the screenshot I was able to get was boosted by an idol. The default number here is 8. So not a great time. And they don't go away. You have to transform them somehow. They do go into your discard pile, so it potentially will be a couple turns until you see them. But when you do see them, you likely will not be happy. One upside is if you draw them on a turn where you are frozen, you could play them to get rid of your frozen to get rid of a rank of frozen. And if you do that, you won't take the debuff because if you're frozen, of course, you don't get any effect of a card you play. You also won't get to draw a card to replace them, but still better than taking Curse and the Enfeebled a lot of the time. So that is the fight in a nutshell. And by a nutshell, I mean that is everything that they can do. So looking at this again, like I said, your main goal going into this fight is you want to have a way to deal with turn 1. You want to ensure that your turn 2 isn't shut down. And then you want to be able to get as much as you can out of turn 2. And you want to make sure that you have which means Cleanse is amazing here. Purity is amazing here. Freezing is amazing here. Front-loaded damage, not great. Anything that's going to involve spending any amount of time fapping about, not getting down to business, not great. You don't want to let these guys cycle up. They have a 4-turn cycle, which is twice as long as Conquest, so you do have a little more time, but they also do a lot more to directly shut down your ability to play your turns than Conquest does. You know, Conquest does a lot of damage, but Conquest isn't dumping Nullifying Decay and Fatigue on you regularly. Conquest isn't freezing out your turns unless you get unlucky with the Wizard. So that is Aspect of Dread. Now, the reward cards. Good news is, both the reward cards, pretty good. Brain Freeze is a mana card that basically says get infinite mana. It says gain mana equal to 40% of the maximum frost of any enemy. Gain Brain Freeze 1. Brain Freeze 1 is a relatively easy to manage debuff. Worst case scenario, you do actually end up accidentally freezing yourself and you have to play out some cards from your hand. But this gives so much mana that it's worth it. The base amount of max mana, and it upgrades 55% of max frost. So the base amount of max frost on Mudraera is all forms is 20, which means that absolutely baseline. You are not ever freezing Mudraera. You get 8 mana out of Brain Freeze, and you get 11 mana out of Brain Freeze Plus. That's if you never freeze Mudraera. If you freeze Mudraera even 1 or 2 times, Brain Freeze is going to be giving you easily, 20 mana, 30 mana, crazy amounts of mana. Brain Freeze is so much mana. Brain Freeze is better than Mana Eruption levels of mana, even on Rowden. And if you've played Rowden with Mana Eruption, you know how much mana that is. Brain Freeze is potentially more mana than Mana Bolt on Catan. Again, if you've used Mana Bolt on Catan, you know how crazy that is. So, if you have any problems with mana, take Brain Freeze. It'll help a lot. If you're not having problems with mana and you don't know what other epic you want, take Brain Freeze, replace your worst mana card. Boom, upgrade. I guarantee you, you have something that is less. You undoubtedly have a mana card that is worse than gain 8 mana and get a relatively easy to manage debuff. Because it's only 1 rank, if you have any cleanse, you can just you play Brain Freeze, you play Clear Focus, boom, done, good to go. And you want to have cleanse. You went into Dread. You probably wanted to bring cleanse into Dread. So yeah, I generally tend to find that Brain Freeze is amazing. Icy Haunt, less directly amazing. It is 4 mana. You apply 25 frost in the enemy, then give it curse 6 if it's frozen, upgrades into 30 frost, curse 8 if it's frozen. This does suffer a bit from how quickly Mudraera scales frost. However, having access to additional frost in Area 4 is often very good. Being able to freeze, especially if you didn't have any going into this, being able to freeze aspects even once or twice, being able to freeze any form of Mudraera even once or twice can be literally life-saving. You will want, there may be other epics you might want instead of Icy Haunt, but if you don't have, honestly, it's in that weird position where it's if you're not a Frost deck, then having the first freeze card is really good. If you are a Frost deck, having one that is this large of a lump sum of Frost can also be good, because if you have a lot of plus status bonuses, this 30 base amount gets a lot of benefit from Adept, because that 25% from Adept is going to be 7-8 extra Frost here, which is nice. Or if you have Crystallize on the enemy, this can easily scale up to quite a lot of Frost. And 4 mana is not a bad price for this, so I would strongly consider. And the curse can matter. The curse can help add up, especially if you're able to play this multiple times. This can easily end up being, a solid solid 16 damage the first time. It's not a ton, but on top of freezing, it's nice. It goes well with things like Swarming Ray from Maw if you're using that, or if you happen to have picked up a Bane or such. There's value here. So that is Aspect of Dread. That is the 6th of 7, that is the 4th of 5 aspects, part 6 of 10 total, if you include the Mudraera parts. So that'll be it for this video. As always, if you have any questions, any comments, anything of that nature, let me know. Leave a comment, like the video, etc., subscribe. A link in the description for the other parts of this field guide. And then come back tomorrow if you want to learn about the aspect of tenacity. Doodles.